The crystal glasses clinked as my father announced the seating arrangements. I stood frozen, designer purse clutched in my trembling hand, as Mom pointed to a small table in the corner filled with my teenage cousins. "Logan, you'll be at the kids' table." My younger brother and sister exchanged uncomfortable glances from their places at the ornate main table, their wedding rings catching the light. At 35 years old, with my own successful business, I quietly gathered my things and walked out of the five-star restaurant without a word. I never thought my own family would humiliate me like that. I'm Logan Barnes, 35 years old, and a successful investment manager with my own office in downtown Chicago. The corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan didn't happen by accident. I worked 60-hour weeks for over a decade, sacrificed vacations, and poured everything into building my career. Growing up, my siblings and I were inseparable. Jake is 3 years younger than me, and Ashley is 6 years my junior. We shared everything from toys to secrets to dreams. When we were kids, I was the leader, the protector, the one they looked up to. I taught Jake how to tie his shoes and helped Ashley with her math homework. We built forts in the living room and staged elaborate plays for our parents. Those memories still make me smile, but they also hurt now, like pressing on a bruise. My parents, Robert and Diana Barnes, weren't always so fixated on traditional values. Dad was a bank manager, and Mom ran a small boutique. They encouraged all three of us to get good educations and pursue our passions. But something shifted as they entered their 60s. Maybe it was seeing their friends become grandparents, or perhaps it was Dad's early retirement that gave them too much time to fixate on their children's life choices. Whatever the cause, their subtle comments about my single status began increasing with each passing year. Jake got married last year to Megan, a kindergarten teacher he met through a mutual friend. Their wedding was a lavish affair at the Chicago Botanical Gardens. I was genuinely happy for them. Jake had found someone who complemented him perfectly. She was outgoing where he was reserved, spontaneous where he was methodical. I threw myself into helping with wedding preparations, organizing a surprise bridal shower, and staying up late addressing invitations. Then, 6 months ago, Ashley married Chris, a pediatric surgeon she met during her nursing rotations. Their wedding was smaller but no less beautiful, held at a vineyard in Michigan. I was a bridesmaid, smiling through the ceremony, even though my long-term boyfriend Tyler had broken up with me just 2 weeks before. "I'm just not ready for marriage, Logan," he'd said after 4 years together. "I still need time to focus on my career." The irony that I'd heard the same words from previous boyfriends wasn't lost on me. Somehow, the men in my life always needed more time while my siblings found partners ready for commitment. After both weddings, I noticed a shift in family dynamics. Holiday gatherings became centered around the married couples. Conversations revolved around Jake and Megan's house hunting or Ashley and Chris's honeymoon stories. My career achievements, like making partner at 32 or being featured in Chicago Business Monthly, earned brief congratulations before the topic returned to my siblings' marital bliss. Last Tuesday, Mom called with a special invitation. "We're having an important family dinner this Saturday at Morton's Steakhouse," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. "Everyone will be there, and we've reserved the private dining room. Please come, Logan. It wouldn't be the same without you." I felt a warmth spread through me. Finally, I was being included in a major family event. I immediately requested Saturday off from work, even though I'd been planning to finalize a proposal for a potential new client. I spent Thursday evening shopping for a new outfit, settling on an elegant navy blue dress and matching heels that cost more than I'd usually spend. On Friday, I picked up an expensive bottle of champagne as a gift. I even scheduled a blowout at my salon, wanting to look my best for this special occasion. Saturday arrived, and I felt genuinely excited as I pulled up to the restaurant. The valet took my car, and I smoothed my dress before walking inside. The hostess led me to the private dining room, where my family was already gathered. Mom and Dad were chatting with my Aunt Patricia and Uncle David. Jake and Megan stood near the window, his arm around her waist. Ashley and Chris were seated at the large central table, looking at something on Chris's phone and laughing. "Logan," Ashley called out, waving me over. "You look amazing. Come see these photos from our weekend in Door County." I walked toward them, feeling better than I had in months. But as I approached the table, I noticed something odd. There were place cards at each setting, and I didn't see mine among them. My confusion must have shown on my face because Mom came over and touched my arm. "Oh, Logan, we're about to sit down for dinner. We have a big announcement tonight." I smiled, assuming I had simply missed seeing my place card. "That sounds exciting. Where am I sitting?" That's when my world tilted on its axis. Mom turned and pointed to a smaller table in the corner of the room, where my teenage cousins Zach, Rachel, and Brittany were already seated, playing on their phones. "You'll be at that table with the kids. We thought you'd enjoy catching up with your cousins." Before I could respond, Ashley stood up and clinked her glass with a spoon. "Everyone, Chris and I have some news we'd like to share." She paused, her face glowing with happiness. "We're having a baby. I'm 12 weeks pregnant." The room erupted in cheers and congratulations. In an instant, I understood. This dinner wasn't about including me in family events. It was about celebrating Ashley's pregnancy announcement, and I was merely an afterthought, relegated to the children's table because, in my parents' eyes, my single status made me less than a full adult. The expensive champagne I'd brought suddenly felt heavy in my hands as everyone clustered around Ashley and Chris, offering congratulations. Jake and Megan moved in for hugs, and Dad wiped a tear from his eye as he embraced his youngest daughter. The private dining room of Morton's Steakhouse, with its rich mahogany paneling and crystal chandeliers, seemed to close in around me. "Isn't this wonderful, Logan?" Mom appeared at my side, her face flushed with excitement. "You're going to be an aunt again. Jake and Megan are trying too, so there might be more little ones soon." I forced a smile. "That's great news. I'm happy for Ashley and Chris." I hesitated, then added, "Mom, about the seating arrangement." She waved dismissively. "Oh, don't make a fuss. The main table is just for 8, and we needed to seat Patricia and David with us since they're hosting the baby shower. You understand." But I didn't understand. Not at all. I glanced around the room, taking in the details I'd missed in my initial excitement. The main table was beautifully set with fine china, crystal glasses, and an elaborate floral centerpiece. Name cards were placed precisely at each setting. Robert, Diana, Jake, Megan, Ashley, Chris, Patricia, David. The kids' table in the corner had plain white plates, regular water glasses, and no centerpiece. My teenage cousins barely looked up as I approached their table. Zach, at 17, was engrossed in a video game. 15-year-old Rachel was texting rapidly, while 13-year-old Brittany scrolled through social media. None of them seemed particularly thrilled about being at this family dinner either. "Hey guys," I said, attempting to sound casual. "Mind if I join you?" Rachel looked up briefly. "Oh, hey Logan. Mom said you'd be sitting with us." She returned to her phone, then added, "This is so boring. I wanted to go to Jenna's party tonight." I stood there, champagne still in hand, as waiters began serving appetizers to the main table. Our table had a single plate of calamari placed unceremoniously in the center. I looked back at the main table, where Dad was now standing to make a toast. "To Ashley and Chris, and to the newest member of the Barnes family," he said, raising his glass. "And to family traditions continuing for another generation." Everyone clinked glasses, and I watched as my brother Jake, 3 years my junior, sat comfortably at the adults' table with his wife. I thought about my downtown office, the team of 6 financial advisors who reported to me, the millions in client portfolios I managed, and the industry awards on my office wall. Yet here I was, assigned to the children's table because I wasn't married. I tried one more time to address the situation, approaching my father as he headed to the restroom. "Dad, I feel a bit uncomfortable at the kids' table. Is there any way we could rearrange things?" He frowned, looking annoyed at my question. "Logan, the seating was planned carefully. The main table is for established families. When you finally settle down with someone, you can join us. Until then, please don't create a scene at your sister's special celebration." I felt like I'd been slapped. Established families? "Dad, I have my own successful business. I own my condo. I've built a life I'm proud of." He patted my shoulder condescendingly. "That's nice, sweetheart, but family is what really matters in the end. Now, Let's get back to dinner." As he walked away, I overheard him speaking in a low voice to Uncle David. "She's too picky. That's why she's still single. All work and no time for dating. Not like Ashley, who knew what her priorities should be." Something broke inside me at that moment. I had spent years seeking my parents' approval, celebrating my siblings' milestones, while having my own achievements minimized. I looked at the kids' table with its half-eaten calamari, then at the main table where everyone was laughing and sharing stories, and I made a decision. Quietly, I gathered my purse and the champagne I'd brought. I walked over to Ashley, hugged her gently, and whispered congratulations in her ear. Then I slipped out of the private dining room, through the main restaurant, and handed my ticket to the valet. No one from my family came after me. No one texted to ask where I'd gone. In their world, I was as invisible as I had felt all evening. As I drove away from the restaurant, streetlights blurring through my tears, I realized I'd finally reached my breaking point. For years, I'd accepted being treated as lesser because I wasn't married. I'd smiled through the intrusive questions about my dating life and endured the constant setups with nice boys my mother knew. I'd watched my younger siblings be elevated to a status I couldn't achieve without a wedding ring. Not anymore. Something had to change, and it would start with me. I barely remember the drive home from the restaurant. My vision was blurred with tears, and my hands shook on the steering wheel as I navigated through Chicago's Saturday night traffic. The 20-minute drive to my Lincoln Park condo felt endless. Each stoplight an eternity where thoughts pounded through my head like hammer blows. Once home, I kicked off my heels in the entryway, not caring where they landed. I hung my coat on the rack, but left my purse on the marble counter that separated my kitchen from the living room. The champagne, still in its fancy gift bag, went into the refrigerator. Maybe someday I'd have something worth celebrating with it. The silence of my condo, usually a comfort after long workdays, felt oppressive. I moved to the floor to ceiling windows that had sold me on this place 3 years ago. 12th floor, corner unit, with views of the city that still took my breath away. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching headlights move like fireflies far below. Then I sank to the floor and finally let myself break. The sobs came from somewhere deep, somewhere I'd kept carefully locked away. They tore through me with physical force, making my shoulders shake and my throat burn. I cried for the little girl who had always tried to make her parents proud, for the woman whose achievements were invisible next to a wedding ring, for the sister who had supported her siblings' happiness while having her own life deemed incomplete. I'm not sure how long I sat there crying, but eventually my phone rang. It was Samantha, my best friend since college. I almost didn't answer, but Sam had a sixth sense about these things. "Hey, Logan," she said when I picked up. "Just checking in. How was the big family dinner?" I tried to respond normally, but instead made a choking sound that triggered fresh tears. "I'm coming over," Sam said immediately. 20 minutes. Don't argue." True to her word, Sam arrived 20 minutes later with a bottle of wine and a pint of my favorite ice cream. She didn't ask questions right away, just poured us both generous glasses of Cabernet and sat beside me on the couch, waiting. Slowly, I recounted the evening's events, from my initial excitement to the crushing realization that I was considered a second-class family member because of my marital status. "They put me at the kids' table, Sam," I said, still in disbelief, "with my teenage cousins, while my younger brother and sister sat with the adults, because they're married, and I'm not." Sam's expression darkened. "That's beyond messed up, Logan. It's outright disrespectful." "The worst part is this isn't even isolated," I said, the realization hitting me as I spoke. "Remember Thanksgiving? They seated all the couples together and put me between Grandma and Cousin Brittany. And at Christmas, everyone got paired gifts for the couples, while I got a single sweater." As we talked late into the night, a pattern emerged that I'd been too eager to please to recognize. Since my siblings had gotten married, I'd been gradually demoted in family status. My parents had always valued traditional milestones, but something had shifted from gentle encouragement to outright dismissal of my worth as an unmarried daughter. "I think I need some space from them," I said finally, as Sam and I split the last of the wine. I can't keep putting myself in situations where I'm made to feel less than. That's completely reasonable, Sam agreed. What are you thinking? A week of no contact, to start. I need to focus on myself and my work. I have that Johansson proposal to finalize anyway. Sam stayed over, sleeping in my guest room. In the morning she made coffee while I showered, washing away the remnants of mascara that had streaked down my face. When I emerged, feeling somewhat more human, my phone showed 3 missed calls from Mom and a text from Ashley asking where I'd disappeared to. I silenced my phone and placed it face down on the counter. Not today, I told Sam, who nodded supportively. The following week, I threw myself into work. I arrived at the office before 7 each morning and stayed well past 8 most evenings. My assistant, Derek, noticed the change in my routine but didn't comment beyond asking if I needed anything when he brought my coffee. My focus paid off when the Johansson proposal was accepted, bringing a 7-figure portfolio under our management. By Wednesday, my family's messages had increased. Mom left voicemails asking if I was still upset about Saturday and saying I was making too much of a small thing. Dad texted that I'd embarrassed the family by leaving early. Jake called once, sounding uncomfortable, asking if we could talk. Ashley sent a message saying she was hurt that I'd left her special announcement dinner and hadn't congratulated her properly. I responded to none of them. On Thursday, Tara from accounting stopped by my office. Everything okay, Logan? You've been here till 9 every night this week. Just busy with the Johansson account, I said, not looking up from my computer. Right, she said, clearly unconvinced. Well, a few of us are grabbing drinks at Palmer's if you want to join. Might do you good to step away from the spreadsheets for a bit. I almost declined, then reconsidered. Hiding in work wasn't addressing the real issue. Actually, that sounds nice. Give me 15 minutes to finish this projection. At Palmer's, surrounded by colleagues who respected my professional accomplishments and didn't care about my marital status, I felt some of the week's tension begin to ease. We celebrated the Johansson account, shared industry gossip, and for a few hours, I didn't think about family dynamics. Then my phone buzzed with a notification. Curious, I unlocked it and found myself staring at a Facebook post from my mother, celebrating our daughter Ashley's pregnancy announcement. So blessed to be welcoming another grandchild. Wish Logan could have stayed to share in the joy instead of leaving early. Some people just can't handle not being the center of attention. The comment section was filled with relatives and family friends expressing sympathy for my mother and speculating about my jealousy issues. Even some extended family members I'd always been on good terms with were chiming in with things like, "Some people never grow up," and "always thought she was a bit self-centered." I must have made some sound of distress, because Tara looked over with concern. "What is it?" I handed her my phone, too stunned to explain. She read the post, her eyebrows rising. "This is your mom posting this? About you?" I nodded, feeling sick. "They're telling everyone I left because I was jealous of my sister's pregnancy announcement." That's not. I didn't even know about the pregnancy until I got there and was already being seated at the kids' table. "That's gaslighting 101, said Marcus, our head of research, who had glanced at the phone. "My ex used to pull that kind of stunt all the time. Rewrite history to make me the bad guy." I looked at the growing comment thread, at the false narrative being constructed about me, and felt something shift inside. This wasn't just about a seating arrangement anymore. This was about a fundamental lack of respect and a willingness to publicly humiliate me to maintain their worldview. And for the first time, instead of feeling hurt, I felt angry. I think, I said slowly, closing the Facebook app, I need to set some boundaries with my family. Clear, firm boundaries. About time, Tara said, raising her glass. To boundaries and self-respect. We clinked glasses, and though the knot in my stomach remained, I felt the first stirrings of resolve. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. I was done being the family scapegoat. After a week of no contact, Mom texted asking if we could meet for coffee to clear the air. I agreed, suggesting a neutral location, a small cafe halfway between my office and their house in Oak Park. Part of me hoped she genuinely wanted to understand my perspective, while another part remained wary after seeing her social media posts. The cafe was busy when I arrived, filled with the mid-morning crowd of remote workers and young mothers with strollers. I spotted Mom at a corner table, already nursing a cappuccino. She looked smaller somehow, her usually perfect posture slightly slumped. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt, then reminded myself I had nothing to feel guilty about. "Logan," she said, rising to hug me. I accepted the embrace stiffly, then took the seat across from her. "It's good to see you. We've been worried." "Have you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral, as I ordered a black coffee from the passing server. "Of course we have. You disappeared from the dinner without saying goodbye to anyone but Ashley, then ignored all our calls and messages. It's not like you to be so dramatic." There it was, the dismissal of my feelings as overreaction. I wasn't being dramatic, Mom. I was removing myself from a situation where I was being disrespected. She sighed heavily. "Is this still about the seating arrangements?" "Logan, the main table only had 8 places. We had to make decisions. And you decided that my married siblings deserved places at that table more than I did, despite being younger than me. You decided I should sit with teenagers instead of with my family." "They're family too," she countered. "And yes, Jake and Ashley are younger, but they've established their own families now. That's important to your father and me. And my accomplishments aren't? My career, my home, the life I've built for myself count for nothing because I don't have a husband?" Mom took a sip of her cappuccino, carefully setting the cup back on its saucer. "Your career is very nice, Logan. We're proud of you for doing well at your job. But at the end of the day, family is what truly matters. Your brother and sister understand that." "My job?" I repeated incredulously. "Mom, I'm a partner at one of Chicago's top investment firms. I manage over $100 million in client assets. I've been featured in business magazines and asked to speak at finance conferences. This isn't just a job." "All right. It's an impressive career," she conceded. "But is it fulfilling? Don't you want what your siblings have? Someone to come home to build a life with? Children of your own?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "What I want is for my family to respect my choices and accomplishments, not constantly imply that I'm somehow incomplete because I'm not married." And what happened at the dinner went beyond implication. It was a public statement that I don't have the same status in this family as Jake and Ashley. Mom shook her head. "You're overthinking this, as usual. It was just a seating arrangement, not some grand statement about your worth. And then you left without a word to anyone but Ashley, on her special night. Do you know how hurt she was? How embarrassed we were to explain your absence to the family? Did you tell them the truth about why I left? Or did you go with the story you posted on Facebook about me being jealous of Ashley's pregnancy?" She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "I may have oversimplified things on social media, but what were we supposed to tell everyone? That you stormed out over a seating chart? You could have told them the truth. That you made your 35-year-old daughter sit at a table with teenagers while her younger siblings sat with the adults, and she found that humiliating." The server returned with my coffee, and I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, needing something to ground me. "I think we should move past this," Mom said finally. "Your father and I would like you to come to Sunday dinner this weekend. Jake and Ashley will be there. We can all talk things through as a family." Despite my better judgment, I agreed to the Sunday dinner. Some part of me still hoped that with everyone present, we could have an honest conversation about the underlying issues. I arrived at my parents' house in Oak Park at 5 o'clock Sunday afternoon. The brick colonial where we'd grown up looked the same as always, well-maintained with carefully tended gardens. Jake's SUV and Ashley's hybrid were already in the driveway. Inside, the familiar scent of Mom's pot roast filled the air. Everyone was gathered in the living room. Mom and Dad, Jake and Megan, Ashley and Chris. Ashley's small baby bump was now visible under her fitted sweater. They all looked up as I entered, their expressions ranging from Mom's forced brightness to Dad's subtle frown to Jake's genuine concern. "Logan," Jake said, standing to hug me. "Good to see you." I returned the hug, then accepted one from Ashley as well. Chris and Megan offered awkward greetings, clearly aware of the tension. "Dinner's almost ready," Mom announced. Let's move to the dining room. At least this time. I was seated at the main table. Small victories. The initial conversation was stilted, focusing on safe topics like Jake's new project at work and Ashley's pregnancy symptoms. I participated minimally, waiting to see if anyone would address the elephant in the room. Finally, after the main course was served, Dad cleared his throat. Logan, your mother tells me you're still upset about the seating at last weekend's dinner. I set down my fork deliberately. I'm upset about what the seating represented. The clear message that because I'm not married, I'm somehow less than Jake and Ashley in this family. That's not fair, Ashley interjected. No one thinks you're less than us. Don't they? I turned to her. When was the last time Mom or Dad asked about my work with the same interest they show in your marriage or Jake's house hunting? When was the last time my accomplishments were celebrated the way yours are? This isn't a competition, Logan, Dad said sternly. You're right. It's not. But it is about respect. And I don't feel respected in this family anymore. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I felt bad, Jake said suddenly. When they put you at the kids' table. It didn't feel right, but I didn't say anything. He glanced apologetically at our parents. I should have spoken up. Thank you for acknowledging that, I said, genuinely appreciative of his honesty. I was hurt when you left, Ashley admitted. It was my special announcement, and my big sister just disappeared. It felt like you didn't care about my news. I left because I was hurt too, I explained. And I do care about your news, Ashley. I'm genuinely happy for you and Chris. But surely you can understand why being treated like a child in front of the entire family was humiliating for me. Ashley nodded slowly. I guess I can see that. I was just so focused on the baby announcement, I didn't really think about how you must have felt. That's part of the problem, I said. No one in this family seems to think about how I feel anymore. The conversation continued, with more honesty than we'd managed in years. Uncle David and Aunt Patricia arrived for dessert, having been invited by Mom without my knowledge. To my surprise, Uncle David immediately took my side. Diana, Robert, you know I love you both, but what you did to Logan was wrong, he said bluntly. She's a successful professional woman, not some teenager. Putting her at the kids' table was disrespectful. Aunt Patricia disagreed. Family traditions matter. In our day, unmarried adults understood their place in the family hierarchy. It's not our day anymore, Patricia, Uncle David countered. Times have changed, and thank goodness for that. Their disagreement sparked a heated family debate about traditional values versus modern family structures. Dad became increasingly frustrated as more relatives sided with me than with him. Enough, he finally exclaimed, his face flushed with anger. This family has values and traditions that have served us well for generations. Logan, your attitude is disappointing. Perhaps if you focused less on your career and more on finding a suitable partner, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Robert, Mom cautioned, glancing nervously around the table. No, Diana. She needs to hear this, Dad continued. Logan, did you know your grandfather set up trust funds for all three of you? Jake and Ashley received theirs upon marriage, as was intended. Yours remains in trust until you either marry or turn 36, whichever comes first. The room went silent. I stared at my father in disbelief. Are you saying you've been withholding my inheritance because I'm not married? It's not withholding. It's following your grandfather's wishes for the money to support family formation. Jake used his for a down payment on their house. Ashley and Chris will use theirs for the baby and perhaps a larger home. And you never thought to tell me this? That there was money waiting for me with strings attached? We assumed you'd marry eventually, like everyone else, Dad said dismissively. Your grandfather believed in incentivizing traditional family values. I looked around the table at my family's faces, some uncomfortable, some defiant, and realized that this divide ran deeper than I had imagined. This wasn't just about a seating arrangement, or even about respect. This was about fundamentally different views of what gave a person value and standing in the world. I think I need to go, I said, folding my napkin and placing it beside my barely touched dessert. This time, as I walked out of my childhood home, I wasn't fighting tears. Instead, I felt a cold clarity. The path forward would require more than just boundary setting. It would require a complete reevaluation of my place in this family and what that meant for my future. The revelation about the trust fund added a new layer to my family's behavior that I couldn't stop thinking about. Why had they hidden this from me? Was their pressure for me to marry partly motivated by this financial arrangement? The questions circled in my mind like vultures, making it difficult to focus on anything else. My work began to suffer. I arrived late to a client meeting, something I'd never done before. During a presentation to the Johnston Group, I mixed up key figures and had to be corrected by Marcus, causing Mr. Johnston to raise his eyebrows in concern. After the clients left, Jeffrey, my boss and the firm's founding partner, called me into his office. "Close the door, Logan," he said, his usual jovial expression replaced with concern. "What's going on with you? This isn't like you at all." I sank into the chair across from his desk. "I'm sorry about the presentation. It won't happen again." "I'm not worried about the presentation. I'm worried about you. Derek says you were sleeping in your office last night. Your eyes have permanent bags under them, and you just called the Johnston Group by the wrong name twice in that meeting." I hadn't realized how visible my distress had become. "I'm dealing with some personal issues. Family stuff, but I'll get it under control." Jeffrey leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Logan, you're one of the best advisors I've ever worked with. You've brought millions in assets to this firm. But right now, you're not operating at even 50% of your capacity. I think you need to take some personal leave." "I don't need leave," I protested. "Work is the one thing keeping me sane right now." "Work is suffering because you're suffering," he countered. "Take 2 weeks. Sort out whatever's going on. The Johansson account will still be here when you get back." I wanted to argue further, but the genuine concern in Jeffrey's eyes stopped me. Perhaps some distance would help. All right, 2 weeks. With unexpected free time on my hands, I decided to do something I'd been considering for months. I scheduled an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Karen Wilson came highly recommended by Samantha, who had seen her after her divorce last year. Dr. Wilson's office was in a converted Victorian house in Lincoln Park, just a few blocks from my condo. The space was warm and inviting, with comfortable furniture and soft lighting. Dr. Wilson herself was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and an attentive expression that made me feel immediately at ease. "What brings you here today, Logan?" she asked after we'd settled into facing armchairs. The whole story poured out of me. The dinner incident, the years of subtle diminishment, the trust fund revelation, and the growing distance between me and my family. Dr. Wilson listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, but mostly maintaining eye contact. "That's quite a lot to process," she said when I finally fell silent. "How are you feeling right now, having shared all that?" "Exhausted," I admitted, "and confused. I keep wondering if I'm overreacting or if there's something wrong with me for not being able to just brush this off. From what you've described, your family has been sending you consistent messages that your worth is tied to your marital status rather than your personal accomplishments or character. That's a painful dynamic, and your reaction seems entirely appropriate." Over the next several sessions, we explored the patterns in my family relationships. How I'd always been the responsible one, the eldest who was expected to set an example. How I'd internalized the need for parental approval and had been seeking it through achievement, when what they truly valued was conformity to traditional roles. "You mentioned that you've had several long-term relationships end when marriage was on the horizon," Dr. Wilson noted during our fourth session. "Do you see any connection between your family dynamics and your romantic history?" I hadn't considered this before. I always thought I was just choosing men who weren't ready to commit. That may be true. But is it possible that part of you was also avoiding making a choice that would validate your parents' worldview? That marrying would seem like conceding that they were right all along? The question hit me like a physical blow. Had I been sabotaging my own relationships as a form of rebellion? The possibility was uncomfortable to consider. Meanwhile, my physical health began to suffer. I developed insomnia, often lying awake until 3 or 4 in the morning before drifting into restless sleep. I lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks without trying. My appetite diminished by stress. Anxiety attacks became frequent, my heart racing and palms sweating at the mere sound of a phone ringing. During this difficult period, I found unexpected support in a women's discussion group that met weekly at a local community center. The group, called Defining Success on Your Own Terms, consisted of professional women in various fields who were navigating similar challenges. My mother asks when I'm going to get a real job every time we speak, shared Alicia, a successful freelance graphic designer. Apparently running my own business that pays all my bills isn't legitimate because I don't have a corporate title. My in-laws refer to my medical practice as my little job, said Julia, a pediatrician. They expect me to scale back now that we have a baby, even though my husband has explicitly said he supports my career. Hearing these stories, I realized I wasn't alone in facing judgment about my life choices. The validation from these women, who understood firsthand the frustration of having accomplishments dismissed, was incredibly healing. One evening, after a particularly insightful therapy session, I received a call from my cousin Rachel, who had been at the infamous kids' table with me. "Logan, it's Rachel. Do you have a minute to talk?" I was surprised to hear from her. Rachel and I had never been especially close due to our age difference. "Of course. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, I wanted to tell you something. I overheard my mom and your mom talking yesterday, and I thought you should know." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "They were discussing some family financial thing, and your mom mentioned that they've been using your financial expertise to help fund family events for years. Apparently, you've been giving them investment advice that's made them a lot of money?" But then she said something like, "It's ironic that Logan's career success helps us celebrate everyone else's life milestones, while she remains stuck in perpetual adolescence." I felt physically ill. For years, I'd been helping my parents manage their retirement portfolio, recommending specific investments, and helping them navigate market fluctuations. I'd set up college funds for Jake and Ashley's future children. I'd advised the extended family on their financial planning, and all while they were diminishing my achievements behind my back. "Thank you for telling me, Rachel," I said, my voice hollow. "I appreciate your honesty." "For what it's worth," Rachel added, "I think it's really cool what you do. I've been reading about investment management because of you. I'm thinking about studying finance in college next year." Her words were a small, bright spot in an otherwise devastating revelation. I'd been used for my professional expertise while simultaneously being told that my career was secondary to finding a husband. The hypocrisy was staggering. That night, I wrote an email to my parents, informing them that I would no longer be providing financial advice to the family. I recommended several other advisors they could consult. I kept the tone professional and detached, as if they were clients I was referring elsewhere. I copied Jake and Ashley, knowing they should be aware of this change, as it would affect family financial discussions moving forward. The response was immediate and heated. Mom called in tears, saying I was being vindictive. Dad sent a terse email accusing me of putting petty grievances ahead of family welfare. Jake texted, asking if we could talk about what was happening. Only Ashley remained silent. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I focused on the recommendations from Dr. Wilson, establishing clear boundaries, prioritizing self-care, and reconnecting with sources of joy and fulfillment outside of family approval. I started jogging again, something I'd enjoyed in college but had abandoned as work became all-consuming. I accepted dinner invitations from friends I'd been neglecting. I even enrolled in a weekend cooking class I'd been meaning to take for years. Slowly, gradually, I began to feel more like myself again. The insomnia eased. I regained some of the weight I'd lost. The anxiety attacks became less frequent. And most importantly, I started to recognize my own worth independent of my family's validation or marital status. "You're making excellent progress," Dr. Wilson told me at the end of my 2 weeks of leave. "But healing isn't linear. There will be setbacks, especially when you interact with your family again." "I'm not sure when that will be," I admitted. "Part of me wants to maintain distance indefinitely." "That's a valid choice, but eventually, you'll need to decide what kind of relationship you want with them moving forward, if any. That decision should be based on what's healthiest for you, not on obligation or guilt. I nodded, feeling stronger than I had in weeks. I'm starting to understand that now. As I prepared to return to work, I felt ready to face whatever came next. I didn't have all the answers, but I had a clearer sense of my boundaries and my value. I was no longer the person who would silently accept being seated at the kids' table. That Logan was gone, replaced by someone more self-aware, more assertive, and far less willing to compromise her dignity for others' comfort. What I didn't expect was the call I received from my mother the night before my return to the office. "Logan," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "your father and I need to talk to you about something important. We're having a family meeting this Saturday at the house. It's about family financial business, and we specifically need your expertise. Please come." The old Logan would have immediately agreed, eager to be needed and valued. The new Logan recognized the potential for manipulation. "I'll think about it," I replied, and ended the call before she could protest. Another test was coming. This time, I would be ready. My return to work was smoother than I'd anticipated. Jeffrey welcomed me back with a warm handshake and no questions about my time off. Derek had maintained my client files impeccably, and the team had collectively covered the Johansson account in my absence. I slipped back into my role with a new perspective, one that valued work as an important part of my life but not its entirety. During my lunch break, I walked to a small park near our office building, enjoying the spring sunshine as I contemplated my mother's request. The family financial meeting could be legitimate, or it could be another attempt to reinforce the family hierarchy. Either way, I needed to approach it strategically. That evening, I called Samantha to discuss it. Mom called about a mandatory family meeting specifically requesting my financial expertise, I explained. "What do you think? Legitimate need or manipulation tactic?" Sam considered this. "Could be either. The question is, what are your terms for engaging with them at all? You need to go in with clear boundaries." "You're right," I agreed. "I'm not walking into that house without some conditions in place." I drafted a brief email to my parents, copying Jake and Ashley. "I'll attend Saturday's meeting at 2 p.m. I'll be bringing a friend for support. I'm willing to provide financial advice if needed, but only in a context of mutual respect. If the meeting devolves into criticism of my life choices or marital status, I'll leave immediately. Please let me know if these terms are acceptable." Dad replied within the hour. "We accept your conditions. This meeting is genuinely about financial matters that require your expertise." With that settled, I considered who to bring with me. Samantha was the obvious choice, but she had a work conference that weekend. As I scrolled through my contacts, I paused at a name I hadn't thought about in months. Ethan Carter. Ethan and I had attended the same college, though we'd run in different circles. He was studying engineering while I focused on finance. We'd reconnected last year at an alumni event and exchanged numbers, but life had gotten busy and we'd never followed up. What I remembered most about Ethan was his calm confidence, and how he'd spoken enthusiastically about my career when I mentioned it, asking thoughtful questions about investment strategies. On impulse, I texted him, "Hey Ethan, it's Logan Barnes from the Northwestern Alumni Mixer. This is completely out of the blue, but would you be available for a favor this Saturday afternoon? I need a supportive friend for a challenging family meeting." To my surprise, he responded almost immediately. "Logan, great to hear from you. Saturday works for me. Happy to provide moral support. Want to grab coffee beforehand to catch up?" We arranged to meet at a cafe near my parents' house on Saturday. When I arrived, Ethan was already there, his tall frame easy to spot. He stood to greet me, and I was struck by how his warm smile immediately put me at ease. "Thanks for agreeing to this weird request," I said as we sat down with our coffees. "I know it's unusual to ask someone you barely know to wade into family drama. Sometimes an outside perspective helps," he replied. "Want to fill me in on what I'm walking into?" I gave him the condensed version of recent events, from the kids' table incident to the trust fund revelation to the suspicious timing of this family meeting. Ethan listened attentively, his expression growing increasingly incredulous. "That's a lot," he said when I finished. "And totally inappropriate treatment from your family. For what it's worth, my sister is dealing with something similar." She's a surgeon, but my parents still ask when she's going to settle down, as if saving lives isn't a worthwhile use of her time. His understanding meant more than I expected. Exactly. It's like, unless you follow a specific life script, your achievements don't count. Well, for the record, being a partner at a major investment firm at 35 is incredibly impressive. I have friends who would kill to have your career trajectory. The simple acknowledgement of my professional success, stated as an objective fact rather than a consolation prize for being single, was refreshingly validating. As we walked to my parents' house, Ethan asked thoughtful questions about my work and life, showing genuine interest in my responses. By the time we reached the familiar brick colonial, I felt centered and calm, prepared for whatever awaited inside. Mom answered the door, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Ethan towering beside me. "Logan, you're here, and you brought a friend." "This is Ethan," I said simply, not offering further explanation. "We're here for the meeting." The living room was already occupied. Dad sat in his usual armchair, with Jake and Ashley on the couch. Megan and Chris were conspicuously absent. "Where are Megan and Chris?" I asked, noticing their absence immediately. "This is immediate family only," Dad replied. "Financial matters." I gestured to Ethan. "Then I hope it's okay that I brought my support person, as mentioned in my email." Dad's mouth tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Fine. Let's get started." I sat in the remaining armchair, while Ethan took a position standing behind it, a silent but reassuring presence. Dad cleared his throat. "We've asked you here because we need your financial expertise. Your mother and I are planning our retirement, and we want to ensure our investments are properly managed." "I thought you were already working with Winston at First Capital," I said, referring to the advisor I'd recommended when I stepped back from managing their finances. "We were, but we're not comfortable with his recommendations. We'd prefer to work with someone we trust." "You?" I raised an eyebrow. "The last time we discussed family finances, you informed me that a trust fund had been withheld from me because I'm not married, while my younger siblings received theirs immediately. You'll understand why I'm hesitant to re-engage with family financial matters." Mom shifted uncomfortably. "That was your grandfather's stipulation, not ours. We were just following his wishes. You could have told me about it years ago," I pointed out. "Instead, you kept it secret while simultaneously pressuring me about my marital status. It's hard not to see a connection." "That's water under the bridge," Dad said dismissively. "We're talking about our retirement now. We need your help setting up the accounts properly and making the right investment choices." I looked from Dad to Mom to my siblings, who had remained unusually quiet. "Is that the only reason for this meeting? My financial expertise? For your retirement planning?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "There's more to it, Logan. Dad's company pension isn't as substantial as they expected. They're concerned about having enough for retirement. And for helping Jake and Ashley with their growing families," Mom added. "We want to be able to contribute to the grandchildren's college funds and perhaps help with down payments on larger homes as the families grow." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. This wasn't about valuing my expertise. This was about accessing it to benefit the real family members, the married ones with children. "I see," I said, my voice deliberately calm. "So you're asking me to help maximize your retirement funds, so you can provide additional financial support to Jake and Ashley, beyond the trust funds they've already received, while I still haven't received my share." "It's not like that," Ashley protested. "We didn't ask for this meeting." "Didn't you?" I challenged. "You've been quiet ever since Rachel told me about how the family has been using my financial expertise while diminishing my achievements." Ashley had the grace to look ashamed. "I didn't know she called you about that." "The point is," Dad interjected, "we need your help with these investments. You're the financial expert in the family." I sat back in my chair, feeling Ethan's supportive presence behind me. "I'm happy to recommend some excellent financial advisors who can help you structure your retirement to meet your goals. But I won't personally be managing your investments anymore." "This is family," Dad said, his voice hardening. "We shouldn't need to go to strangers for financial advice when we have an expert right here." "Respect is a two-way street," I replied. You can't treat me as less than a full adult member of this family while simultaneously expecting to benefit from my professional expertise. Mom looked tearful. Logan, we've always been proud of your career. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. Really? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. You don't understand why being seated at the kids' table at a family dinner might make me reluctant to provide free professional services? Why discovering that a significant inheritance was withheld from me based on my marital status might impact my willingness to help with family finances? Why hearing that you use my financial success to fund celebrations of everyone else's milestones while considering me stuck in perpetual adolescence might affect my enthusiasm for managing your NDA? Retirement? A stunned silence fell over the room. Ethan placed a supportive hand on my shoulder, and I reached up to briefly touch it in thanks. Who told you that? Mom finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Does it matter? The point is that it was said, and it reflects how you truly see me, as less than, as incomplete, as someone to be used for their expertise but not respected for their accomplishments. Jake stood up suddenly. She's right. We've all been complicit in this. The kids' table incident wasn't isolated, it was just the most obvious example of how we've been treating Logan. Ashley nodded, tears in her eyes. I didn't want to see it. It was easier to focus on my own life than acknowledge how unfairly you were being treated. Dad remained stoic, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. This confrontation was forcing him to examine beliefs and behaviors he'd never questioned before. I have a proposal, I said, breaking the tense silence. I will help you structure your retirement planning, not as your daughter, but as a professional financial advisor. We'll set up formal meetings at my office. You'll receive the same level of service as any of my clients, no more and no less. And in exchange, I expect to be treated with the same respect you'd show to any adult professional, regardless of my marital status. I paused, then added, and I want the trust fund issue resolved. Either release my portion now, without marriage conditions, or I'll consult an attorney about the legality of withholding an inheritance based on marital status, which may constitute discrimination. Mom gasped, but Dad's expression shifted to one of grudging respect. You've changed, he said, not unkindly. I've grown, I corrected, into someone who knows her worth isn't determined by a wedding ring. The meeting ended shortly after, with tentative agreements to my terms. As Ethan and I walked back to his car, I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe years. I had stood my ground and advocated for myself, and for the first time in my adult life, my family had actually listened. That was impressive, Ethan said as we reached his car. The way you handled that whole situation. Thanks for being there. Having you as backup made it easier to stay strong. He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Happy to help. And for what it's worth, I'd love to hear more about your work sometime. Maybe over dinner next week? I found myself returning his smile. I'd like that. As I drove home that evening, I realized that something fundamental had shifted. I had spent years trying to earn my family's approval while simultaneously resenting their standards. Now, I was finally learning to define success on my own terms. And surprisingly, that felt like the biggest accomplishment of all. The following Thursday evening, Ethan and I had dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Wicker Park. The conversation flowed easily as we shared stories about our college days, our careers, and our families. Unlike previous dates where I'd carefully curated my image, I told Ethan honestly about my ongoing family situation and my journey towards setting healthier boundaries. It's been eye-opening, I admitted, as we shared a tiramisu, realizing how much of my self-worth was tied to their approval, even as I resented their standards. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. I had something similar with my dad. He wanted me to join the family construction business, and when I chose engineering instead, there was this constant undertone that I'd let him down. It took years to recognize that his disappointment wasn't my responsibility to fix. His understanding was refreshing, and as the evening progressed, I found myself genuinely enjoying his company. We had a second date the following weekend, and a third the week after that. There was no pressure, no rush, just two people connecting and appreciating each other's company. Meanwhile, I prepared for the first official financial advising session with my parents. I reserved our firm's conference room and prepared presentations and documents, as I would for any client. When they arrived, I greeted them professionally and offered coffee before beginning the meeting. "Thank you for coming," I said, handing them folders containing retirement planning options. "I've analyzed your current financial situation and prepared several strategies for maximizing your retirement income while allowing for the additional goals you mentioned." Dad looked slightly uncomfortable with the formal setting, but nodded appreciatively as I walked them through various investment options and tax strategies. Mom seemed surprised by the depth and clarity of my presentation. "You really are excellent at this, Logan," she said when I finished. "I never realized just how knowledgeable you are in your field." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the compliment without elaboration. "Do you have any questions about the strategies I've outlined?" We spent another hour discussing their options, with me answering their questions patiently and thoroughly. By the end of the meeting, they had a clear understanding of their financial situation and a solid plan for moving forward. "We'll need to schedule a follow-up in about 3 months to assess how these initial investments are performing," I said as I gathered my materials. "My assistant will contact you to set that up." As they prepared to leave, Dad hesitated, then turned to face me. "Logan, I owe you an apology, seeing you in your professional environment today. I'm beginning to understand that I've undervalued what you've accomplished. That was wrong of me." The acknowledgement, however belated, meant more than I expected. "Thank you for saying that, Dad." "About the trust fund," he continued. "I've spoken with our attorney. We're releasing your portion to you next week, no conditions attached. It was never my place to add stipulations to what your grandfather intended as a gift." I felt a surge of vindication but kept my expression neutral. "I appreciate that." Mom stepped forward, her eyes suspiciously bright. "We're proud of you, Logan. We haven't expressed that enough, but we are. Your success is remarkable, and it's time we recognize that properly." "I'd like to believe that," I said carefully. "But I need to see consistent changes in how you treat me, not just in what you say today." They both nodded, understanding that rebuilding trust would take time and consistent effort on their part. The following week, I received paperwork confirming the release of my trust fund, a substantial sum that would allow me to expand my investment portfolio significantly. More meaningful than the money, however, was the implicit acknowledgement that my worth as a family member wasn't contingent on my marital status. As the weeks passed, subtle shifts occurred in my family dynamics. Jake called regularly, not just for financial advice, but to genuinely catch up on my life. Ashley invited me to her ultrasound appointment, an intimate moment that signaled her desire to include me in important milestones, regardless of our past tensions. The real test came when Mom called to invite me to a Sunday family dinner. "Just casual," she assured me. "Everyone will be there, including Aunt Patricia and Uncle David." I hesitated, memories of previous family gatherings making me wary. "Will Ethan be welcome to join us?" Ethan and I had been seeing each other regularly, our relationship deepening naturally over shared interests and mutual respect. "Of course," Mom replied without hesitation. "He's important to you, so he's welcome in our home." The Sunday dinner was a revelation. The seating arrangement included everyone at one large table, with no distinction between married and single family members. The conversation flowed easily, touching on everyone's interests and achievements. Dad asked thoughtful questions about my recent client acquisition, while Mom showed genuine interest in Ethan's engineering projects. Even Aunt Patricia, who had initially defended the traditional family hierarchy, made an effort to engage with me as an equal adult. "Your mother tells me you've been helping them structure their retirement," she said during dessert. "Gerald and I might need similar advice soon. Would you be willing to meet with us professionally?" "I'd be happy to," I replied, appreciating her acknowledgement of my expertise. After dinner, as everyone moved to the living room for coffee, Uncle David pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," he said quietly. "Standing up for yourself wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And look at the changes you've inspired." I glanced around at my family, noticing the subtle but significant differences in how they interacted with me. There was a new respect in their eyes, an acknowledgement of my adulthood and accomplishments that had been missing before. "It wasn't just about me," I told him. It was about challenging assumptions that harm everyone. The idea that marital status determines someone's worth or maturity hurts us all. He nodded thoughtfully. You know, your cousin Rachel has been talking about following in your footsteps. She's applying to business programs for college, says she wants to be a badass investment manager like you. The knowledge that my stand had potentially changed the path for the next generation of women in our family was profoundly satisfying. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner party at my condo, bringing together both my birth family and my chosen family of friends. Ethan helped me prepare, moving effortlessly around my kitchen as if he belonged there, which increasingly he did. Our relationship had evolved naturally, built on mutual respect and genuine appreciation of each other's strengths and passions. Ashley, now visibly pregnant, brought a homemade apple pie. Jake and Megan arrived with a bottle of my favorite wine. Sam came with her new boyfriend, while Tara and Marcus from work rounded out the group. My parents arrived last, bearing a housewarming gift, even though I'd lived in the condo for years. We realized we've never properly celebrated your home, Mom explained, as I unwrapped a beautiful art piece for my living room wall. It's past time we corrected that oversight. As we gathered around my dining table, I looked at the faces of the people I loved, struck by how much had changed in a single year. My parents now asked about my work with genuine interest. Jake and Ashley treated me as an equal rather than their spinster sister. And in Ethan, I'd found someone who had never needed me to be anything other than exactly who I am. Before we eat, Dad said, raising his glass, I'd like to propose a toast to Logan, who had the courage to demand respect and the wisdom to forgive when it was finally given. You've taught this old man that family isn't defined by traditional roles but by love, respect, and mutual support. I'm prouder of you than words can express. Tears pricked my eyes as glasses were raised around the table. The journey had been painful at times, but the destination was worth every difficult step. Later, as Ethan and I cleaned up after our guests had departed, he wrapped his arms around me from behind. Your dad's toast was pretty special, he said, resting his chin on top of my head. I leaned back against him, savoring the comfort of his embrace. It was, I never thought we'd get to this place. You know what I admire most about you? He asked. You didn't just fight for yourself. You changed things for every woman in your family. Rachel, Ashley's daughter someday. They'll grow up knowing their value isn't tied to a wedding ring. His observation crystallized the most important lesson I'd learned through this journey. True self-respect isn't just about standing up for yourself. It's about creating ripples that extend beyond your own experience, challenging harmful patterns that limit everyone's potential. As I looked around my home, filled with evidence of a full and meaningful life I'd built on my own terms, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had everything I needed within myself. The respect and love of family and friends were wonderful additions, but they weren't the foundation of my worth. That came from within, and no seating arrangement could ever diminish it again. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself with family, even when it was difficult? Comment below about a time you had to set boundaries or demand respect from loved ones. I'd love to hear your stories and how you handled similar situations. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more authentic stories about navigating complex family dynamics. Share with someone who might need to be reminded of their worth beyond traditional expectations. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your value is never determined by your marital status, but by the strength of your character and the courage of your convictions.